Hi, everyone.
Hi, Kate.
Hello. Hey, you want to go ahead and start us, Kate?
Pardon me?
It's after 4:30 if you want to go ahead and start the meeting.
Let's start. I hereby call to order the Patton Township Planning Commission meeting of October 5th, if you will. And welcome, everyone. And to begin, let us start with the review of the minutes. Does anyone have anything to add or discuss around the minutes? Hearing none.
And move we approve the minutes.
I second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Still approved. Thank you. Public comments. If there are any folks in the audience, either virtually or in person, who would like to bring up items that are not directly related to the items on the agenda, please let us know. All right, hearing none. Moving on. So the Reserve East preliminary subdivision plan for the intersection of Grayswoods Boulevard and Meeks Lane, which I walk by every day. So who would like to take that on? Nicole?
I'll go ahead and start with that. So I believe a good bit of us are probably already familiar with this plan. It was originally submitted and approved back in 2015. It is in conjunction with the reserve that was most recently approved in 2018, but that first approval was actually in 2013. This plan is proposed to create one single-family lots, 3 open space lots, giving a total of 44. And this subdivision plan also includes a shared use path that will extend from the intersection of Grayswood Boulevard and East Lane along Grayswood Boulevard. Property is zoned A1. It is within the regional growth boundary and Super Tourist area. And there will be public open space and parkland requirement, and they are going to meet that requirement by the shared use bike path, and the remaining will be a PMU contribution. And I do believe that Mark Toretti is in the room to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nicole. So, any questions, any conversation?
I guess my only question, which we had previously talked about, was the bike path that's going to be, hopefully, eventually be on Meeks. Do we have any idea that, or do we have any idea of when the bike path would be built in proximity to the development? We're not looking at a development where maybe 10 years go by before the bike path comes?
It could be. Yeah. I mean, they provided the right-of-way for it. It's up to us to build it. So right now, the Recreation Advisory Committee is going through a process of updating our parks and bikeway plan. And from there, they prioritize bikeways that we have indicated we'd like to have in the township. Don't have that document yet, but it should be forthcoming yet in October.
When you look at all the bike paths with this this little chunks would seem to connect a lot of developments. In your mind, is it more of a, would it be more of a higher priority with this little chunk, or no?
No, not necessarily. I mean, they're looking at everything in the township. And I would, I can't give you an answer on that right now without looking at what they're doing. So the Recreation Advisory Committee will bring that out. We can have a look at that sometime in the near future. It'll be going to the board later this month. They may push it back to Planning Commission for some for review, but in it, they'll lay out at least a 5-year plan for bikeways, which is pretty much highly dependent on getting grants too, so. So I couldn't tell you, if I said it was gonna come in the next 5 years, I'd probably be wrong, so.
So could we consider, so Mark, right now, there's no way to, other than waiting for the bike trail, I don't see any way for this current development to connect to to this intersection.
The way it is, internally, there's sidewalks along both sides of the street. And then right by the space and in between lots 52 and 53, we do have a sidewalk connection here.
Oh, perfect.
That goes and connects out to it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was, I remember an initial,
Yeah.
the first time, that was one from the township.
Okay. I do think the bike paths are really important, and hooking up the various bits and pieces that are out this way would be really good. Any other discussion?
What about, did we talk, lighting, is that necessary on Meeks? A couple lights out there? That's kind of a dark spot in there. And not only that is, there's like a bit of a dogleg in there. There's not a lot of visibility, am I correct?
So we had talked about increased lighting along the boulevard. What about on Meeks Lane?
Typically, you might put lights at the intersections, but other than that, you wouldn't see many lights anywhere.
Yeah, we do have them proposed. I know it's the proposed intersections. I'm not positive we have them proposed at the existing there. I know all the proposed ones.
Okay.
We have a street light.
The planning commission would like to see ones at the intersection at Meeks Lane and out at Grays Woods and Meeks. I guess we have another one across the street, but
Grace Woods is in the other development.
but at the intersection of Grays Woods and Meeks Lane, where there'd be a sidewalk intersection crossing there. I mean, the church is gonna put one in on the other side, but the planning commission could put that in their motion of approval.
And where would that make sense? At the intersection or where the sidewalk comes out?
I would just say at the intersections at the roads, because what you want to do is light the road for pedestrians. So where pedestrians are crossing the road, the drivers have a better chance of seeing them.
So was there not some additional lighting requested for the church across the street?
Yeah, I think they were supposed to add one at the corner on their side.
I think more
But
lighting is good.
I would say at this point, ask for it. And if we
Okay.
find out it's really not needed, we can drop it. Can't ask for it later on, so.
Okay. What is the timeline for this subdivision to be built out? Do we know?
Well, it was probably about 5 years ago. We're still waiting on the UAJA's regional pump station. The reason we're bringing this plan in is because when we got it through 5 years ago, we were told it'd be just a year or two after that, the pump station would be there, and we're still waiting. And we were told now it'd be 1.5 to 2 years, because we really can't do anything until that gets in. So.
Yeah, if you recall, UAJ's been talking about putting a pump station down on Meeks Lane. I'm gonna say down where the sharp curve is, down where the barn is, right next to the road. And
Yeah.
they're working on their planning efforts right now to get that done. So Mark's probably got the latest time frame.
Is
And
that-
then, if you recall, there'd be a force main then would run up Meeks Lane and eventually would go all the way over into,
Marcus?
behind Valley Vista Park, yeah, thanks, Ken.
How does this connect to, there's a trail behind Pantops that, does it get near this development?
No,
There's some
no.
other properties in front of here. That may have been, from the original reserve, there was some right-of-way that was given.
Yeah, there's no connection to that bike trail over there. No, there'd be a bike path along Meeks Lane.
Right, but there's nothing, we're not that close to what's in the back.
No, but you just go you go to Marywood, and then you can get to that trail through Marywood.
And how do we connect to Marywood here? Do we have to go
Along
out
Grayswoods Boulevard.
or along Gracewoods
Yeah,
Boulevard?
by shared use path, that's going to be all along there,
Okay.
from both the reserve and from the reserve east.
So we had some discussion years ago about this being where the old nursery was and like lots of herbicides and pesticides.
That was the reserve, that wasn't, this property was, we called the Barnes tract, that Ada Barnes owned it. And this one was actually probably a little bit more from some ore mining and things like that. The topography is a lot of ups and
But
downs.
it's what's wooded out there now.
Yeah, it's all wooded there now.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion, folks? And Doug, what do we need to do here?
You need to take a vote and make a recommendation to the board.
So the recommendation would include language around adding additional lighting?
If that's the planning commission's desire, yes.
Planning Commission?
I make a motion, we approve the Reserve East preliminary subdivision plan, subject to all staff's comments, and in addition, we add lighting at the intersection between Grays Woods and Meeks Lane.
So that would, just to clarify, that'd be one with the local, with their internal road in Meeks Lane and at Grace Woods and Meeks Lane.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'll
All right,
second.
a motion, leave a second.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Okay, thank you.
all.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you,
And
Mark.
Brian, very nice motion, Mason.
It'll be on the October 14th board agenda.
Okay, great.
You
And
can,
then we'll talk about the apartment, you know, a little bit, I think I have a little letter, we'll talk about that.
okay.
Okay. So I think we are kind of at the end of our agenda. Is that correct? So we will move on to our work session, correct?
Correct.
All right. So adjourned. Thank you all. And hello, everyone. Welcome to the work session. We are going to talk about talk again about affordable housing. And I'm going to turn it over to Nicole here. She is the expert.
Working on it. Okay.
Before we do, could we clarify for everyone out there that is not associated with the Plan Commission or the township that this is a work session to talk about a potential solution to affordable housing? There's been an awful lot of chatter on next door in Park Forest again today, thinking that we're trying to put something in Park Forest again. And I want to assure everyone that, number one, we're not, and number two, the work session doesn't generate any kind of official resolution or recommendations to the Board of Supervisors to change zoning. I just think I don't understand why there's all this chatter about what we're trying to do every time this is on the work session agenda. So I hope that's clear.
Thank you, Harry. I think that's appropriate that the public realizes that we spent we had pitched an idea for a zoning change that was shot down. We now are at we're kind of regrouping to figure out where to go from here.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
So Harry, great point. Brian, great second. So it's really is just a discussion, right?
Correct.
And I will tell you that I assiduously avoid social media, so I haven't looked at Nextdoor or Facebook. But I appreciate you bringing that forward. Thank you. So we're just having a discussion about, at this point, it's philosophical almost, right? Like, what are the options and where can we go next? And so Nicole has again done incredible legwork, and I think it's time to discuss that.
So I have the standard intro into this, how it's been ongoing, and we need kind of a multifaceted approach because one thing isn't going to magically solve the issue of affordable housing. So currently, we're talking about expanding the mixed-use overlay district.
Nicole,
to
can you
other-
speak up a little bit or get closer to your microphone? Thank you.
So tonight, we're going to talk about expanding the mixed-use overlay. And we also have inclusionary housing that we're going to look at as well. So tonight, we're going to primarily focus on that expansion of the mixed-use overlay. So following our last meeting on September 14th, we did mail out a meeting notice to the properties that would be eligible for that expansion. Given that we are still early in this process, we will send out a notice for the adjacent properties at a later date. So at this point in the meeting, I would recommend that if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to speak about expanding the mixed-use overlay district, that we hear their comments and have discussion about that now. Don't think there's anyone.
It would be any properties that are currently zoned C2. So that includes.
It's like the Walmart Center.
Doesn't she have a map? Nicole, do you have a map of the C2 properties that you can bring up?
Says it only the ones in orange you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes.
Anything highlighted in red is zoned C2.
Can you turn that 90 degrees? So if you got a notice mailed to you, then your property is in the C2 district.
That's such a small area, Nicole. Can we just verbally tell the public what that area is? Am I looking, so guys, it is,
It's the Colonnade, it's Walmart. I think there's only a handful of properties that would fall into that.
Home Depot, Lowe's, mostly where current big box stores are, and then behind Red Lobster, I think all the area around the Red Lobster then is included along with Patton Crossing, which already has mixed use on it. Now, it's generally the larger commercial parcels in the township.
Isn't that Patton Crossing should also be on there?
Well,
Patton Crossing already has the overlay on it. So, yeah.
Nicole,
Yeah,
Control Shift plus equals.
that's what I was doing. Okay.
There you go.
I just needed you to tell me. Thanks, Steve.
So, exactly what is the discussion then?
Well, the point of this tonight was to hear any community feedback from any of the
All right.
property owners or anyone. We sent notice to all of these property owners highlighted in red to let them know that we'd be talking about this tonight and that we wanted to hear what they thought about it. And in the meeting notice, which I included in our September meeting materials, but I also re-included it tonight as a reference, included a little bit extra information on what that would mean to them. Chris to do this. And I did not get any feedback via email or telephone in the last few weeks. And I don't think anyone else has either, so I'm not sure. There might not be any community conversation at this point.
I do have a question.
So, I would agree, I've heard nothing. So,
Hang on, we have one person in the audience. Do you want to come up to the mic?
Yeah.
So they can hear you.
Just introduce your name, and that's all you got to do. Thank you for coming.
Hi, I'm Angie Walk, and my husband and I received the letter about the overlay and the proposed changes. And it's kind of confusing. You show these red, and what is the concept that you're going to change those to multi-use, or that's where you plan to put in this workforce housing, or is it going to affect the entire area? So I guess what's proposed here is not very clear. So it's hard to give feedback when there's not a real clear definition of what you're planning to do, because we do have real estate that sits in behind the Walmart in the Strauss Avenue area between Strauss and Fifth Avenue. So I guess we just need a definition of what you guys are proposing, what's going to be affected, before we can even really truly understand to have a conversation about it.
Fair enough.
So the proposal is those parcels that are highlighted on that map would be considered for the addition of an overlay that would permit mixed uses on those parcels. And as part of the mixed use, there'd be a requirement to provide a percentage of units, at least 5%, that would be affordable housing or workforce housing. You have to use the podium, please, so everybody in the audience, everybody on Zoom can hear you. Introduce yourself, please.
Yes, I'm Roy Walk. And is this government subsidized housing, or what type of workforce housing? Or I've experienced this workforce housing on a couple other developments that I've done within the borough. And I was actually the first guy that experienced workforce housing on how they were handling theirs. So I was just trying to figure out, is it the same sort of copy of what the borough's working with in their workforce housing, or you haven't decided that yet?
No, there's a definition in the mixed use overlay district. I just got to pull it up to make sure I get it right. It's subsidized housing, let me put it that way. It's the way it's going to be in Patton Crossing will be rental housing. That's subsidized, and in that case, the developers are going to provide the subsidy themselves. But there could be other ways that it could be done. It would probably be something of a negotiation when a developer would bring in a master plan for the site. So the mixed use overlay district requires a master plan. And under that master plan, there could be some negotiation on exactly what the workforce housing, or let me say affordable housing, really exactly what it might be. I'm getting there.
So in Patton Crossing, how many units are going in there for the condos? Just to give you an idea.
Well, they're not condos, they're apartments.
The apartments, how many units?
36? Does that sound?
36.
36, we have 36 workforce housing units, but there's a lot, how many are in total? Does anyone remember?
Well, it's at the end of they'll have 10% of their units will be affordable housing units.
Is the township setting the fee on that? The rent fee?
At this point, yes.
Oh.
So right now I'm trying to get there so we targeted a certain income bracket.
I remember that.
And for those people in that income bracket, the rent would be set, I think, at 30% of their. Okay. So and this was what we ended up with for Patton Crossing. It's what's in the regs right now, so it'd be the starting point for any new negotiation. Designated as affordable housing units for tenants earning less than 65% of the area median income. So that's a pretty low bar. And I think, I'm not finding it
Doug, I have
right
some
off, but I think it was set so their rent would be, oh, there's a caveat for, you can't find qualified tenants and within a certain period, you can go up to 80% of the area median income. And I believe somewhere in here, and I'm not finding it right off, but their rent would be set at 30% of their income.
Yeah.
So that's what pretty much defines affordable housing is more or less than 30% of your income. So rent would be based on their incomes. Yeah, rent for affordable housing units shall be no more than 30% of qualified tenants' household gross monthly income. And it goes on to explain how that's calculated, so.
Okay, thanks.
Did you
But
have any?
Some of those issues could be probably renegotiated as part of a master plan.
And right now you have it set at 10% of
Well-
the total number.
Well, I will tell you, it starts at 5% of the number of units, and then that you have to provide under these regulations, and then you can provide another 5 to 10% that are incentivized. So if you go over the 5%, you can get another market rate unit for each additional affordable housing unit you add to the site.
Okay.
Plus you get another allowance for impervious cover. So that's from 5 to 10%. And then after 10%, there's no more incentives.
We appreciate people coming, so if there's anything you would like to add, we are happy to listen.
No, that's just some questions that I ran into with this affordable housing program during development. And there were some options that you could buy it out if it ended up coming in and allow the township to purchase other places if you didn't want that to be mixed. And, so I didn't know if that had been part of the discussion or.
It was, but we never got, this is what we ended up could negotiate with the Patton Crossing folks when we were doing the rezoning for that. So, but again, that's an option that could be looked at. Let me just put it at this point, there's probably nothing that's off the table. You'd have to do something that's probably equivalent to what's in there. But it'd be a point that we can negotiate that as part of the master plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My question on that then too, are you setting like a minimum number of units that this starts at? Like, does it start with 10 units because 5% would only give you a half a unit? Or are you starting with, like, if you're building something 20 units or larger?
Yeah, most of the C2 properties are large,
Okay,
like 10 acres or more, so they yield a lot. If it was a half a unit, we'd round it up to 1. So no, there's no minimum, it's just a percentage.
okay. Just from a landowner's perspective or somebody trying to develop, it becomes very difficult when you're setting a rent at a very low price when it costs just as much to build that unit as it does
Yeah,
the other
well,
units.
the
And
whole
the real
mix-
estate taxes,
yeah.
of course, don't change for it either.
Well, the whole mixed use package provides lots more incentives for the property owner.
Okay.
A lots more incentives for the property. Basically let you do twice as much on your property, almost, as you could under the C2 zoning.
Okay. And you're just restricting that right now to that overlay that you have shown on the map?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So at this point, though, we don't have any developers teed up, right?
Pardon?
We don't have any developers up to do this work, correct? This is all purely
No, this is
hypothetical.
probably gonna mostly be driven by redevelopment of those existing commercial areas. So I think except for the property next to Sheets and a little bit of property next to Home Depot. All the other property is currently developed or has a plan on it.
So to the point of our citizen here, this is not imminent. This isn't going to happen overnight.
No. Now, the Walks here, they do own some C2 property also, I think, or along, do you still have property along Atherton, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm interested, Anita, what is the perspective of the Board of Supervisors at this point?
I had seen that Betsy Whitman is also on this call, and I would defer to Betsy to answer that question. Betsy, are you on?
Can you unmute her?
I can ask her that.
So.
Sorry, I just had to figure out how to unmute. It's different setup. Actually, Anita, I think you're well situated to answer, or Kate, ask the question again. I was noodling on something else.
Curious where the Board of Supervisors is, what they're thinking around the whole question of affordable housing.
Yeah. I would say the Board of Supervisors has not had a formal discussion on this. I mean, I could speak to my personal perspective as an individual supervisor who supported the 10% level at Patton Crossing when I was on the other side there. I've wondered, among the plots that are shown up on this map, the one includes where the theater is by the Lowe's property, and I'm wondering, as life goes on, as you read about viability of theaters, whether that particular property might come online for redevelopment. But I don't know who the owners of these various properties are. The supervisors themselves have not had a discussion about this proposal.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. It's Betsy. Yeah, that's for sure. We have not discussed this. This is the first, certainly, that I'm seeing it. I have a question for Doug. Would the use of this C2 zoned area as to include an overlay, that would be as requested by a developer, would consider it on a case-by-case basis, and that this property is eligible for that?
That's probably a detail to be decided. I think the proposal that the Planning Commission was looking would be to open it up to anybody any C2 parcel that would like to redevelop, that they'd have access to the MX2. So however you want.
I guess that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
So basically, any parcel within this shaded area, the C2, would be able to apply for that overlay.
Well, I think the intention was just to would be to rezone all of them to overlay so that they could use it if they so desired, but that's an option. I mean, you can do it either way. I think if you want to provide the incentive to the developers, it's probably more advantageous just to put your cards on the table and rezone it at this point, other than to hold it out as a possibility and make them, hold it out as a possibility and make them go through the rezoning process and each individually. That's going to be less attractive to them.
For sure. Oh, we could have another Patton Crossing. I like that. And also, just to be clear, the overlay is essentially less restrictive than what we have now in C2. That would not require any of the existing property to change, or they would be grandfathered in if it did.
Yeah, the overlay would just be an option that they could take advantage of. The issue with the overlay setup, though, it's not, you can't really parse it. You can't do part of the parcel because the overlay requires a master plan. So as the township, we would retain some leverage that, you know, they couldn't come in and say, oh, I only want to do 10% of my property as an overlay, as the overlay district. We probably, our first comment would be, no, we want to see you master plan your whole property to include the overlay district characteristics. And, you know, that would be the start of the discussion. Instead of discussing, I mean, and then, as I was telling Mr. Walk, I mean, there could be areas where you could have some discussions and negotiations, and you might have to change the overlay zoning district somewhat. So there could be parts of it that you would have to change for each lot. So you'd have to do some rezoning, but you're not talking about starting from scratch and redoing each lot, so.
Thank you.
And Doug, this is being presented to us. Is there property owners that have been requesting this for a while?
No, this is one of the items that the planning commission picked on their list of things that could be used to address affordable housing.
And in fact, that was some time ago. I think Greg Garth was when we raised our hand around this. So quite a while ago.
Yeah.
So are there concerns about, you know, people's income levels around like, what are the concerns people would have around this? Having affordable housing in their backyards? Like, why would you not want to have that? That's my point. I know Bill brought up a point about the medium income for the folks who would be eligible for this. It's certainly lower than a lot of people in State College, but so, Bill, do you want to chime in?
Well, I think there's a whole suite of characteristics that people might associate with affordable housing, which is what I suspect drove the negative response over the proposal for the duplexes within the R2 property. And we can't do anything, well, maybe that's the challenge, is to help change the associations, the perspective, maybe calling it by a different name, but we all know what happens to that. The names can change pretty quickly. My sense about the proposal in the R2 zoning was that duplex is to some people a charged word that has uncomfortable associations. I don't know for sure.
Well, referring back to the R2, we were talking about affordable housing, and most of the negative responses took that as being low income, which affordable housing is not necessarily low income housing. It was kind of I'll be blunt, it's an us versus them type of attitude that came out.
And it was a not in my backyard.
Yep,
right.
indeed.
Yeah, and I think Jim, I was watching the video from the meeting in September, which I do want to officially say I apologize I missed. Had another meeting, but the conversation that started on Next Door Park Forest led it down a path that was very different from the intended
yes
picture. to be drawn from this. And that happens. So we, need to anticipate that, although it's hard to anticipate the unknown. But now that we have, I want to accept the responsibility for the turmoil that occurred at that planning commission meeting, or share the responsibility. It was as upsetting to me, although I didn't do the work, so I can't say as upsetting. I was upset and very disappointed at the response, but I understand why it happened. You could see it rumbling from afar and had very little recourse to stop it. So I think the challenge is to anticipate a little bit the next time and to get in front of it. Oftentimes a one-on-one conversation works much better to answer concerns and fears than a 1-on-50. And certainly social media is ripe for churning those ideas that are fearsome. So I'm not offering any solutions, just some ideas going forward.
The nice thing about this proposal is that no one really lives in these current C2 districts. So that helps. The discouraging part is there probably aren't a lot of opportunities for many affordable housing units in these areas, but of everything we've tried, this one would probably meet the least resistance, I would think.
So let me try to chime in here and give some numbers for people on what we're talking about. And I only have a 2018 median household income in front of me right now. So 2018 median household income was $65,967. So rounding that up to $66,000. Well, you said it was 65%, so their median household income would have to be $42,900 to qualify for these housings. And to put that in a perspective of local jobs that pay that, a adjunct professor at our wonderful university here starts at $41,000. So, you're talking, the people that we're talking about here are actually going to be the starting professors at Penn State. And I think that's something that we've been hitting on over and over and over again. And those numbers are pretty close to what I just spat out. So, those amounts of money right there are almost what you see starting wages from Penn State. In fact, some of those starting wages from Penn State are even less than that. So I'm just trying to give some context of the individuals that we're trying to help out here. Starting professors, staff working at Penn State. At 65,000 median income plus the cost of housing, a lot of people are going to have to commute into town to even start a job with Penn State.
Thank you, Bill. That's very helpful. And puts some perspective to the entire conversation.
And not only was it helpful, but we have not done a good job of communicating that to anyone, because everyone is thinking it's a bunch of po folk that, work at McDonald's and Wendy's and those sorts of places. So shame on us. We need to do a better job of presenting this information to the people.
Well, back to the R2, there was a young couple, they're young professionals. And that's really, for our area, that's what this targets as much as anything, is young professionals starting out. They can't afford a $300,000 house. But they got to find some place to live if they're going to work here.
And if they don't want to commute and.
Right.
So So this is all good stuff, right? This is all what we should be doing. So I ask the group here, how do you recommend we move forward in terms of communications and recommendations to the board?
Well, I'm going to say, start with putting real, instead of just saying, 65% of median net, put real numbers in front of people and then associate real numbers with what local employers are paying, like exactly, an adjunct professor, a starting adjunct professor from Penn State. Since they are our largest employer in the area, starting with those numbers and showing people, because I think most people are going to look at an adjunct professor and say, an adjunct professor is the type of person that I want living in my neighborhood. Again, I think the NIMBY effect, and then also, people's assumption that, we're just trying to give, somebody, I used to work for McDonald's, so, just somebody who's doing hourly burger flipping at McDonald's, a chance to live in the area. That's, what we're not talking about. We're actually talking about, professors, school teachers, potentially paid firefighters, EMTs, all the services that people want in this area, that if those people wanted to live in this area, either we're going to have to pay them way more money, or they're going to be living and commuting 2 hours, 3 hours from somewhere else. And of course, then we lose out on them spending money in our community and just being a member of the community and want to be tied to the community.
What it's worth, as a voting member on the board, I'd like to point out or add that progress in this affordable housing realm is probably going to take some very hard votes. And they can be taken. You saw it happen in Patton Crossing when that project was initially presented, when the public initially heard about it. It was a little further on. But the response, from my perspective, and I don't think I was on the board at that point, I was in the audience, but even then, later became on the board, was huge. It was negative. And we took the board just pushed through it and took some hard votes. But one thing that we also did that happened to work for that project was set up a citizens advisory committee. They met 4 times. I think I apologize if I've explained this before, but I think the 2 groups started off this far apart, and after the discussion it came a little bit closer, and it was the board's job to, find that point where we could get something done. And I think the same thing will happen here, where I would also like to point out, as you all already know, we are currently in very tumultuous times, very unsettling times. And what guided my vote last month was the sense that this would not be the right time to take on this, I'll call it a challenge, just because 75% of the people who spoke negatively doesn't mean that a board can't make a tough decision and vote against that negativity. I'm not saying they would, I'm not saying what I would vote, but I think now is not the time, maybe in a year. So my interpretation was, when we decided to table it, and Anita mentioned this at the last meeting, it truly was to table the discussion, and this will probably bring up some discussion on next door Park Forest, but that was certainly my intent, and that we will revisit it sometime down the road.
If I may? So we're talking about this kind of in isolation, but if we bring this up into the broader context of I don't know, climate change and climate migration, more people will be moving to our area, right? We know that because people are leaving the places that are really hot and on fire or underwater. So should we not be thinking about this more holistically about how we want our township or our region to look in 5 or 10 years as opposed to this one question of a couple neighborhoods in the C2 district?
So I could also jump in here to say that there's a climate action and adaptation committee that is being set up now across COG. So all 6 municipalities, they are taking this holistic view of planning across the entire region, and obviously, since it's climate, taking those changes into consideration. One item is, of course, transportation. That accounts for 20% of the carbon, the CO2 emissions. So having housing, be it affordable or otherwise, in a higher density is certainly to our advantage. The Climate Action and Adaptation Committee will not have any regulatory powers, but it will have education and persuasive commitments. And I have great hope for that, but as we all know, human behavior is a very difficult thing to change. But I'm in it for the long haul, as long as I'm here. I think many of us in the region are. So I think affordable housing or workforce housing ties directly into what we're doing with the sustainability, and that is on a region-wide basis. So I'm actually very hopeful about taking that holistic approach.
I guess I would like to see, we've made so much progress on affordable housing. And Betsy, I agree with you. I think had the timing been different in a different climate, not in a pandemic, that perhaps we would have had a different outcome. So I would like to just, for simplicity, just to table this for 6 months and then revisit it again. And I think in the next 6 months, we should reprioritize and focus on something other than affordable housing, just given where things really are. So I think we've done a ton of progress, but I think the timing right now would be better. We would probably be better served by focusing on just spending our energies in another direction temporarily, allowing things to just get back to somewhat of a normal.
I agree.
And I honestly think we as a community and on the Planning Commission, we have talked about it for years. And I think it's just appropriate just to let it just focus on something else for the time being, with the intention to go back to it. Certainly, we've made a lot of progress, and that's taken a lot of effort, so I don't want to see that go away. I'm just suggesting we work on something else for the next 6 months or perhaps a year. How do you guys feel on the Planning Commission? I feel like we're spinning our wheels at this point.
Yeah, Brian, I agree with what you're saying, because I think also, our entire financial situation in this county and, also in the township, we don't know where we're going to be at in the next 4 to 6 months. So, I think to try to tackle this with, even these stats and figures might be different at that time. I think that's a great idea.
And we didn't also mention the fact that the rental portion of the affordable housing is, the marketplace is making drastic changes on that with all that's being built downtown. So, this also gives us an opportunity to kind of let some of that play out, because when those buildings that are all new will be rented out. And that means the units that on the perimeter, such as Patton Township, those rents might naturally go down. They would have to, just to sustain those units. So there's lots of things going on here that would justify to me just to table it.
So one thing another factor that's really important to consider is the virus and what that's going to do to the rental market, right? It might be a blip, but it's probably going to be at least a year, right? So we need to be cognizant that what we see right now may not be what we see in the future.
Correct.
The rest of the planning committee.
Maybe we ask the board if there's anything they would like us to focus on other than affordable housing for the next 6 months.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, staff's got a project for you.
There we go. It didn't take long.
You might not appreciate it, but.
Can you give us a little crumb of what that might be?
A complete rewrite of our sign regulations.
Well, there you go.
I like that. That sounds really refreshing.
Bring them in line.
That'd be more fun.
That sounds fun.
That'd be more fun than this.
They can have anything they want as long as it's hand carved.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And everybody gets to do it on every property in the township.
And we at one point touched on electric cars, and we left that, we didn't go too far with that, but that could be another area that we want to explore in more detail.
We can give you an update on that, about what's going on in the marketplace.
Ryan, do you mean charging stations or?
Correct. I'm saying there's lots of other things we can focus on, so I think we just need to go in another direction for a little bit.
Yep, I agree.
Rich, what do you think? Jim?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I already said my statement, and I just think there's just too many moving pieces right now, and we don't even know what the tax revenue is going to be. We don't know how the rent's going to be affected. We don't know how many of our township businesses are going to stay. We don't know what plan they have at Penn State for, how they're going to eventually phase in all students back to in-person learning. I just think we should table things at this point.
I am so excited to talk about signs.
The one thing I'd be remiss not to say, is, I do think that if we table, especially with talking about the C2 overlay right now, that we may lose a massive opportunity given a whole entire pandemic response and, possible economic downturn of investors coming in later to revamp things. So I would, I'm okay with tabling it, but I would like to see at least the C2 go up to the, to progress to the board, and something there. I would like to see that move forward.
I partially concur with that, but realistically, the majority of the C2 districts, they aren't going to change for who knows how many years or decades to redevelop into a mixed use.
Correct.
Correct, but there are a few that are in pre-development right now, and I think if you put the carrot on the table, even though they were approved before the pandemic hit us, that maybe people will change and maybe that catalyst will be, but we won't know if we don't give that opportunity of that overlay.
What exactly is in pre-development in those C2 areas?
The next to Target, we approved that. What was it, in February?
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's a great point, Bill. Robert, what are your thoughts?
Betsy Whitman here. Speaking for myself, I would like to see that come before the board. The C2 arrangement, the overlay on C2. Just saying.
Anita here, as someone who learned quite a bit about the overlay through Patton Crossing, I also would like to see it come before the board. I think there's real flexibility and possibilities. I don't see a downside to considering that.
Then, Brian, I don't remember if we've actually officially put a motion to table, but would you mind a friendly amendment to say that we send the C2 up to the board with staff's recommendations, and also we table any other discussions for 6 months.
This is Doug. I'm going to recommend if you want to move forward with the C2 overlay, as Nicole said, the next point would be to probably reach out to all the people who own property around the C2 district so that they have a notice that this is being discussed. And then after that, maybe that would be an appropriate time to send it to the board.
We can't actually approve any legislation tonight in a work session, can we?
Correct.
That's what I thought.
You can talk about the way you'd like to proceed, but
Yeah, that's fine. No, I understand that.
Yep.
The only concern I have is we all have good intentions, but the political, the climate right now, is this the right time to even propose that? Bill, I don't disagree with your logic. I'm just not so sure that we don't end up in the same predicament we were 2 months ago.
Well, I think ultimately, I think it's something that we should move forward on. I do think that, especially if we put numbers into context for people, as just a quick Google search shows, that it may be fine, it may not be fine, and if people, if we have the same blowback that we did from the last meeting, then maybe we should do a 12-month, vacation from ever touching this third rail.
Works for me.
Yep.
Back to on the C2. Anita brought up a good one where the theater is up over off of Valley Vista, Carnegie. And then there was a proposal on next to Patton Crossing that I always called it the Templeton property, where they were wanting to develop that. Haven't heard anything since they brought that forward. But perhaps they would be interested in a mixed-use overlay for their property. And the theater might fold in the next 6 months, who knows? So if we had something on the books a few months down the road here, someone may decide to redevelop those in a different way.
True.
And I don't think over in Colonnade that one will go for a mixed-use overlay. They'll probably stick to their guns on the proposal they brought forward. But who knows? They haven't done anything yet that I know of, so. But if it's on the books and they have the possibility, maybe they'll rethink. So in that respect, for those 3 properties anyway, if we had something on the books, they might do something.
Not to mention that company may not survive.
Right.
So if you don't have it on the books and somebody else comes in or buys that up, they'll never have the option to make that decision.
So help me here. What language is it we want to get on the books?
We want to bring forward somehow, talk a little bit more about bringing forward the C2 overlay for all the C2 properties.
Okay. Is that something we address tonight, or is it something we let the supervisors noodle around and give us some feedback around for next meeting? Supervisors?
Anita here. If I could suggest, I liked the person who mentioned you're talking about entry-level people at Penn State finding housing, to mention in your communications about C2 as a way to have on the books the possibilities for possible housing for professional employees in this area. I think that will set a good tone of understanding.
Thank you, Rita. Betsy, thoughts?
I certainly would like to see it as an option. I don't think there's going to be any harm coming from it, and if there is, then we can, as we did with the proposal for the duplexes in R2, we can say we'll table it for a year or so. But I don't think it's going to have the negative response. We'll only know by trying, really.
Right.
Brian?
Until we ask.
What do you think?
I think the consensus is to move forward, and I agree with you, Anita. I don't think we're going to have as much pushback because it's commercial properties. And Bill, I like your perspective as, you know, some of these landowners might not make it through the pandemic. Many of them are already retail based. So probably giving future investors more options is practical and might be the perfect time to do so. So I think perhaps we do move forward. And the reality is, it's not a lot of, the majority of the area we're defining is 80% developed anyways.
Yeah.
Right.
However, things could change. Like you said, maybe the theater will fold, and then perhaps it just gives us more, the landowner more opportunity for other choices.
And if we ever need something that's much worse than dealing with C2 overlays or anything like that, the board can ask us to consider nuclear power as a cheap, effective, carbon-free something or another. So, form of electricity that will make anything else look nice.
Correct.
That was a joke, Betsy.
So what do we need to do to move forward on C2?
This is a good question.
DAF needs to contact adjacent landowners, I guess?
That's what I was going to say. I can revamp that meeting notice letter that was sent out for tonight to include some of the language that Bill suggested about the AMI and who in our community that speaks to, and then have it sent to the adjacent property owners for our November meeting. Doug, I think we'll be okay to get that out in that amount of time. Is that reasonable? So that we can talk about it in November. And then I guess we could send it to the board pending how that conversation goes. I mean, that's how I see us proceeding with this.
But it sounds like this needs to be an agenda item next month, not a work session item.
Yeah, I'll put it as an actual.
Okay, perfect. That way, if we want to move it forward, we can.
Yeah.
Thank you, Harry. Okay. So are we good for the go forward plan?
I think so.
All right. Doug, Nicole, Alex, anything else we want to get on the table here? Stephen?
I don't know if you guys want to go through the rest of the agenda because it's more about just affordable housing and the survey that we did do, and just other resources, and the fact that I have been having regular discussions with the planning staff for both Ferguson Township and State College Borough about what they're doing to kind of keep a thumb on how things are working out for them. And Ferguson is actively looking to redo their workforce housing ordinance. So, I mean, I can continue to keep up on that. If we do want to kind of step away from the affordable housing conversation, I'll make sure that I'm at least still paying attention regionally to what's happening. So when we come back to it, I have all that information ready. So I don't know if you guys want to talk any more about this, but if we're looking to get away from affordable housing, I mean, that's all I have for the rest of the meeting.
They had some good information this time, Nicole.
Mm-hmm.
I offer it up to the group.
I'm good. I'm getting hungry.
Before you,
Thank you, Nicole.
I'm pushing this rope forever.
before you adjourn, I would like to say one thing, if I might, which is that I understand completely the anger and the frustration that you felt upon hearing the board's decision to table the work on affordable housing, but I would like you also to consider how proud I think that you should all feel of the work that you've done. I certainly feel extremely proud to be a member of Patton Township and to have a planning commission that really took on a yeoman's job and did it extremely well, thoroughly. I have talked to people in College Township, they're not even there yet. In fact, they are considering following suit because of the work that we've done. So that is how I feel, and I apologize that I had no idea of the scope that we were asking you to take on, but please feel proud about the amount that you did and the results that you have arrived at. So.
Thank you, Betsy, and
Betsy.
we've got some really great people on the commission, that's for sure. Working hard.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, folks, so I'm sensing the people are ready to be done. So shall we close it for this evening? And just remind everyone to vote. And thank you all. Meeting adjourned.
Waiting for my ballot.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.